Hello learners, here I welcome you in the third module of the course. In the second module of the course, we have studied about probability sampling method in detail. We have seen that in probability sampling methods, there are 5 main sampling methods: simple random sampling method, stratified random sampling method, systematic sampling method, cluster sampling method and multi-stage sampling method. Here in the third module of the course, we are going to study about non-probability sampling methods in detail. Probability sampling methods follow probability theory, but non-probability sampling methods does not. Let's see how it works. Non-probability sampling method, an individual has unequal chance to being included in the sample, and that is non-random. Non-random or non-probability sampling refers to the sampling process in which the samples are selected for a specific purpose with a predetermined basis of selection. The sample is not a proportion of the population and there is no system in selecting the sample. The selection depends upon the situation. No assurance is given that each item has a chance of being included as a sample. There is an assumption that there is an even distribution of characteristics within the population, believing that any sample would be representative. So, if we see the types of non-probability sampling methods are judgmental, convenient, quota and snowball sampling techniques. Let's see one by one. Judgmental or purposive or deliberate sampling method. In this method, the sample selection is purely based on the judgment of the investigator or the researcher. This is because the researcher may lack information regarding the population from which he has to collect the sample. Population characteristics or qualities may not be known, but sample has to be selected. In this method of sampling, the choice of sample items depends preliminarily on the judgment of the researcher. In other words, the researcher determines and includes those items in the sample which he thinks are most typical of the universe with regard to the characteristics of research project. For example, suppose 100 boys are to be selected from a college with 1,000 boys. If nothing is known about the students in this college, then the investigator may visit the college and choose the first 100 boys he meets, or he may select 100 boys all belonging to third year, or he might select 25 boys from commerce, 25 from science, 25 boys from arts and 25 from fine arts courses. Hence, when only the sample size is known, the investigator uses his directions and select the sample. The use of judgmental sampling is justified by some premises. Let's see. If there are a small number of sampling units is in the universe, judgment sampling enables inclusion of important units. Judgment stratification of population helps in obtaining a more representative sample in case research study wants to look into unknown traits of the population. Next, judgment sampling is a practical method to arrive at some solution to everyday business problems, but there are some limitations too. The judgment sampling involves the risk that the researcher may establish conclusions by including those items in the sample which conform to his pro-convinced ideas. There is no objective way of evaluating the reliability of sample result in this sampling method. If we see convenience sampling method, convenience sampling is commonly known as unsystematic, accidental or opportunistic sampling. According to this procedure, a sample is selected according to the convenience of the investigator. So, in this method of sampling, The choice of sample items depend on preliminary on the judgment of the researcher. In other words, the researcher determines and includes those items in the sample which he thinks are most typical of the universe with regard to the characteristics of research project. A type of non-probability sampling which involves the sample being drawn from that part of the population which is close to hand, that is readily available and convenient. For example, suppose 100 car owners are to be selected. Then we may collect from the RTO's office the list of car owners and then make a selection of 100 from that to form the sample. So, a convenient sampling may be include the following cases: when universe is not followed defined, when sampling unit is not clear, and when complete list of source is not available. Then this method will be very helpful to researcher to convey the research process forward. So, if you see that this much of population we have in the study and researcher conveniently taken this sample as the sample of the study. Next is a quota sampling technique. In this method, the sample size is determined first and then quota is fixed for various categories of population, which is followed while selecting the sample. In this method, the quota has to be determined in advance and intimated to the investigator. The quota for each segment of the population may be fixed at random or with a specific basis. Normally, such a sampling method does not ensure representative of the population. For example, suppose we want to select 100 students, then we might say that the sample should be according to the quota given below. Boys 50%, 50% girls, then among the boys 20% college students, 40% plus 2 students, 30% high school students and 10% elementary school students. A different or the same quota may be fixed for the girls. This is basically depend on the researcher how he or she wants to take the sample by using quota sampling method. So we see the merits of the quota sampling method. Here reduces cost of preparing sample and fieldwork, since ultimate units can be selected so that they are close together. It introduces some stratification effect. As just we have seen stratified random sampling method of probability random sampling methods. But there are demerits of quota sampling too. Introduces bias of investigator is not involved at any stage. The errors of the method cannot be estimated by statistical procedures. Since random sampling is not involved at the stage, the errors of the method cannot be estimated by statistical procedures. Quota sampling is most commonly used in marketing survey and election polls. But it does not mean that it cannot be used in social science and educational research. Last, we can see snowball sampling method in non-probability sampling methods. Snowball sampling refers to identifying someone who meets the criteria for inclusion in the study. Selection of additional respondents is based on referrals from the initial respondents. You can see the snowball sampling process in the figure. That if we want to study about health effect of cigarette on some smokers, in that case we don't know people who are smoking regularly, frequently or sometimes. In that case, if we know few smokers in the society, we can get information of other smokers through that particular samples, and that way we can have larger number of smokers in the society and our sample become larger and larger after collecting data from individuals gradually. See the figure very carefully. This is one another example that site coordinator contacts 5 potential interviews identified by organization of persons with disabilities. These 5 individuals give further information of some other samples for the study referred by each interview of the initial stage. Gradually, we can get more information from the second row of the samples. These are all about the non-probability sampling method. Non-probability sampling method used when probability sampling method cannot be used by researcher by any means. In that case, investigators have defined few non-probability sampling methods that we can use in our researches, and we can select appropriate sample by using those methods, and we can reach up to the appropriate meaningful conclusion of our study by using such sampling techniques. So, here we have learned about non-probability sampling methods in detail. Thank you. Have a happy learning, students.